Manistee City Council meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Michelle, can you please take the roll?
Mayor Kenny.
Here.
Councilmember Cody.
Here.
Councilmember Zelinski.
Here.
Councilmember Goodspeed.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Woodruff.
Here.
Councilmember Gustin.
Here.
Interim City Manager.
Here.
City Attorney.
Here.
DPW Director.
Here.
Finance Director.
Here.
And City Engineer.
Here.
Thank you. Does anyone like to comment on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to new business. Consideration adopting the 2015-16 budget and capital improvement plan. Under section 7-4 of the charter, the annual budget must be adopted before May 15th of each year. The budget has been the subject of multiple work sessions and a public hearing. At this time, council could take action to adopt a resolution approving the 2015-16 budget and capital improvement plan. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that council take action to adopt the resolution approving the 2015-16 budget and capital improvement plan for the city of Manistee.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Gudstad, supported by Councilmember Goodspeed, to approve the budget as presented. Is there any further discussion, questions, comments? Seeing none, can you please take the roll?
Councilmember Cody.
Yes.
Councilmember Zelinski.
Yes.
Councilmember Goodspeed.
Yes.
Mayor Kenny.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Woodruff.
Yes.
Councilmember Gustin.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to notices, communication, and announcements. The only notification we have is that the work session for tonight's been canceled. Next, we have a discussion, the 12th Street and possible closed session regarding city attorney opinion. The agenda attachments include a memorandum from the interim city manager and further explanatory memos from the city engineer, DPW director, and public safety director. City staff will review the information at the public hearing. In addition, the council has received a written opinion from the city attorney regarding 12th Street and related legal issues. The city attorney has recommended that council consider discussing the written attorney opinion, which is exempt from disclosure under the Michigan Freedom of Information Act as involving material covered by the attorney-client privilege in closed session pursuant to Section 8H of the Michigan Open Meetings Act. Only the legal opinion may be discussed in closed session. The balance of the discussion will occur in open session. If necessary, the following public discussion, council could take action to proceed into closed session under Section 8H of the Michigan Open Meetings Act to consider the city attorney opinion on this subject. So we're going to go to closed session first. We're going to have public discussion.
Yes, Madam Mayor and members of the council, if I may, I'd like to have the engineer of record, Mr. Sean Middleton from Spicer Group, along with Mr. Jeff McCool, the DPW director, kind of walk through where we are today and what our options going forward are. Then they'll open up for questions and discussion from the council. And then following that public discussion, adjourn into closed session to hear the city attorney's opinion and discuss it in more detail, with an expectation that there wouldn't be a lot of additional discussion after you come back from the closed session. But if there is, then there is. But that's the current hope and expectation. So, Mr. Middleton and Mr. McCullough, if you would.
Good evening. The section that we're talking about is 12th Street, specifically between Oak Street and Maple Street. As everybody's aware, this section of road is in severe deterioration and disrepair. It has issues with drainage, it has issues with the asphalt surface, but even more important, it has issues with the actual base. The gravel base is not sufficient. And we also have some geometry issues with the alignment of that roadway. These are just some snapshots of what we go through every spring when we go through the freeze-thaw cycles. The potholes pop up just about as fast as we can fill them, and we've got crews that go out there to fill those almost on a daily basis. It's difficult to see in this slide, but right here is the original plat of the Hart and Robinson's addition to the city of Manistee. And this is the section of 12th Street that was laid out contemplating 66 foot of width. Because the city limits goes right down the center of that 66 foot, the plat actually created the north 33 feet of it. And, get my mouse back, when Oak Street was constructed, the asphalt kind of tucked into that north side and then connected back at Maple Street. This is a different view, but these are the existing, let me start over here. This is the existing right-of-way that's in that 33-foot width within the plat. Maple Street here, Oak Street here. The purple line represents the corporate limits, so to the north of that or up on this drawing is the city of Manistee, and below that is actually in Filer Charter Township. The black lines are actually survey shots that were completed on where the physical surface of the roadway currently exists. So you can see that below that 33 foot, which is this dotted line here, there's actually a substantial portion of that roadway that is outside of that zone. When Manistee High School was constructed, the school acquired right-of-way that was to ensure that there was 66 foot between Oak Street all the way west to Tamarack Street, and then constructed a driveway to local street standards from Oak Street up to Tamarack Street. Years later, the city acquired that right-of-way, so the city now has right-of-way 66 feet wide all the way up to Tamarack, and then the school dedicated the roadway portion of what was their driveway into the city's street system. So this is the same information overlaying on the city's GIS. So you can see here at Maple Street, that pavement is outside of that northern 33 foot, slightly in this area, gets to about 8 to 9 feet wide outside of that or south of that, and then it curves back into this section that the school constructed, which is down the center of that 66 feet. Sean's going to take you through some of the detailed engineering items.
Thanks, Jeff. A lot of this was in the memo I sent. I'm not going to go through in a lot of detail. We can come back and do questions and answers at the end. But some of the need for improvement on the road, it's pretty obvious. The condition of the road, Jeff talked about that. The traffic loading itself is beyond the standard that's there today. There's traffic loads that really should be irrelevant to a major street standard. The patterns in the flow of traffic in that area due to that misalignment with the right-of-way is a concern for both flow and potentially for safety as well. So similar to building a home, there's standards, engineering guidelines, practices that go into play when you build a road, and engineers are doing road design. They have some minimum guidelines they need to meet. And also similar to building a home, where there's a threshold of doing work where you need to start really implementing these guidelines. In the case of 12th Street, there's enough work that has to be done at a bare minimum. The base is failing. We're not looking at a superficial improvement to it. It's significant enough where it kicks in some of these guidelines. And I won't go through them in detail, but there's AASHTO, a national guideline for geometric design. More relevant to us, the Michigan Department of Transportation has some what they call local agency guidelines that follow cities and villages, and there's specific standards and rules that apply to engineers and the design of these roads. And probably most importantly, the city of Manistee has a major street standard, and that's in place for higher traffic flow areas, higher pedestrian traffic flow areas, and the main function is for safe passage of vehicles and people. So specific to 12th Street and looking at the major street improvement standards, backing up, with AASHTO, The minimum width for this area would, based on daily traffic loads, the amount of truck or bus traffic, and speed limits, is 12 feet, minimum lane of 12 foot wide. You could potentially go to 11 foot based on the percentage of truck traffic, but based on guidelines, really it's a minimum 12 foot lane by just AASHTO standards. In addition to that, the turning radius is out there. There's some minimum guidelines for that. And we looked at typical bus, 40 foot in length. What is the absolute minimum turning radius that we would need to get around the corners from Maple Street onto 12th or 12th onto Oak? And on the bare minimum, that's a 25 foot radius. And that's important because really to be able to fit these roads in the right of way, a lot of it's controlled by the turning radiuses where near the intersection of the roads. They actually drive as much, the lane widths are probably less important than some of these turning radiuses and the ability to fit it within the road right of way. So the City of Manistee major street standards, to hit on that real quick. Again, this is designated under the Act 51 maps as a major street, and therefore it should be designed at some point to a major street design. At this point, it's not meeting that standard. And as I mentioned earlier, the reasons for that major street standard are to convey higher traffic and really safely pass vehicles and pedestrian traffic. And that's accomplished on the major street standard with wider bike lanes, or actually wider shoulder width / bike lanes, 3.5 to 4 feet along the edge of the roads, and then sidewalks on both sides to keep the pedestrians out of the traffic lanes. Kind of getting very specific to the location here, the proposed section, 2 12-foot lanes, 3.5 foot shoulders or bike lanes, curb and gutter, which is typically 2 feet in width. So the overall distance from the back of the curb to back of curb is 35 feet. In addition, the major street standard has 5 foot sidewalks on either side, and that's typically a foot off the road right away. And so they're typically tucked back, which then allows for a green belt area that's 8 to 10 feet wide on each side, and allows for mailboxes to be placed or snow to be plowed into, or just kind of creates a green buffer. So when we were asked to look at this, we kind of laid out just what are the basic criteria we got to meet to come up with some design options. And the first one, probably most importantly, was when the road's done, we want it built inside a publicly owned right of way. Whether that's existing right of way that's there today, or the potential of acquiring additional right of way. So that was a fundamental point in our looking at the design options we were considering. The other part of that is the guidelines I mentioned earlier, satisfying those guidelines, both these national and state standards, and meeting the Manistee street standard, major street standard. So we ended up basically boiling it down to 2 primary options. And the first one we're referring to is the major street standard, and that's the one that satisfies, really for the most part, all the aspects of the city standard. And that one does require additional right-of-way. It won't fit in that 33 feet, so additional right-of-way would be needed south of that 33-foot existing easement. And it also satisfies all the other requirements of AASHTO with turning radiuses and lane widths. And we'll look at a couple of sketches or drawings of these in a minute so you can see it. Option 2, we looked at what can we possibly build within the existing right-of-way that's there today. What would fit in there was the maximum road we could put in. And we looked at trying to fit 2 lanes and several different options. But the reality is, because of the way the turning radiuses are coming in off of Maple Street and you're really even onto Oak Street, and that limited 33-foot width, we really can only look at a one-way traffic scenario going westbound. And that would basically pin it right to the south portion of that 33-foot right-of-way, put the road in, the sidewalk would remain in place to the north, and that's basically the maximum design we can put in there. We can try and squeeze 2 lanes in, but you wouldn't have the turning radiuses. you just wouldn't achieve it. The buses wouldn't be able to, they'd be cutting the corners too short. And you'd have to give up some of the sidewalk. So with that, it's a little, I apologize, this drawing's a little busy, there's a lot going on with it, but again, similar to what Jeff said here, is on the right-hand side, this is Maple Street, and you're looking upper north. This is Oak Street, and then 12th Street is in this section right here. The red lines depict the existing right-of-way that's out there today. As you can see, like Jeff mentioned, some of that pavement is south of that existing right-of-way today. Working kind of from south to north, this alignment right here is proposed sidewalk. That sidewalk, in the typical Manistee Major Street standard, would be set back from the curb to allow for storage of snow. But due to the, the proximity of the homes here and the consideration for front lawn areas, we've got that pinned up against the curb, the back curb. Now that, speaking of the curb, this is the curb line. That's in an alignment that would line up with any future work of taking the local street portion of 12th Street west of Oak and making that major street, because up by the school, that is a major street cross section. And so what this allows is to push the major street cross section all the way from the high school, really ultimately out to 31. And so then there's that standard pavement width, and then the curb and gutter on the north side, and then these radiuses meet the minimum criteria for bus access and turning. We do show some stormwater improvement or storm improvement. With the curb and gutter, we can set some basins in the curb and then promote a better drainage of the road. The second option that was mentioned is the one-way going westbound. This option, again, the red lines represent existing right-of-way, and with consideration for staying within that right-of-way limits, we put the curb as close as we could to that existing right-of-way line. We've got a minimum width for one-way traffic, and then curb lines on the north. And so in essence, this lane would line up with the northerly lanes to the west and to the east. Of course, this would be one-way traffic. It promotes flow into or towards the school, but outbound traffic from the school would definitely put more traffic load on Tamarack and possibly on Oak Street. And again, this one, the sidewalk remains in place. And, just to kind of hit home the point, this turning radius, what controls it is we have this at this minimum radius. And so cars coming southbound, turning in here, need that maximum sweep. When they're coming from the south, they've got the ability to use both lanes to make the turn, so we can keep that radius tighter. So that's a lot tighter radius on that south end. So just to finish up a little bit, then we have, this is just a photo looking east along 12th Street from a little bit west of Oak. And you can kind of see in here how the existing lawn areas project out into the alignment of the road. You can get a sense of that. And so what we did is we just prepared a kind of a simple rendering, photo rendering, to get a sense of what it might look like if we were to go to the major street standard. So if you kind of focus on the double center lines in the foreground, and it's hard to see, but in the background you can see the center lines as well. The next photo here is, again, just a photo rendering, but it gives a sense of how that southerly curb line would be moved back. You can see the sidewalk. In this particular rendering, we show a little bit of green space in there, but in the other drawing, we actually had that pinned up against the back of curb. We didn't do the option 2 rendering, but in essence, if you can imagine the southerly lanes at this location and the bike lanes would, of course, kind of project out to that center line, and then it would have to come back in here to taper in. So that would be, if you could imagine that this right-hand side would be greened out area, and there wouldn't be sidewalk. I think with that was kind of our overview. I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
So I think the summary is that we can keep patching it, but we can't really do anything to fix it unless we go to one of these two options. either the Major Street Standard or the one-way west. And obviously, the Major Street Standard would require clarification on the right-of-way with the two adjoining property owners. There have been repeated attempts to have discussions with those two property owners over the years, city officials, school officials, county officials, and others. And apparently their attitude is that they just don't want to talk about it, and they're private property owners, so they've got the right to say, no, we don't want to talk about it. But if we're going to do anything short of a taking of the rest of the right-of-way, assuming that's necessary, and we don't know that yet, there are some additional options that could be explored if they were willing to have those discussions. For example, only, we probably could meet Major Street standards and not need all of the 33 feet, but rather just a portion. But if we can't have that conversation, then we can't have that conversation. Under any scenario, I would recommend that we at least make one more effort to have that conversation, no matter what the next steps are. And if we're successful there, and there are some alternatives that we can discuss that are mutually beneficial, then it seems to me that we should pursue them. But if we're not able to have that conversation, then at some point in the near distant future, my recommendation will be that we ask Mr. Saylor, the city attorney, to find out what rights we already have. Because we may already have all of the rights that we need to construct in that 733 feet of right of way. And the city attorney's opinion went into that in a little bit of detail, and we can have more of that discussion later in executive session. But the short summary is we may already have all the rights that we need. We just don't know them. So with that, I think I would close the initial presentation and open up for any questions or comments that the council might have. One other footnote I should share with you, there has been a committee of sorts working on the 12th Street issue for quite some time. Two council members are on that committee. They can give you more history than I. But that includes representatives from the school, from the county, and from Fowler Township. And there was another meeting as recently as last week where we basically walked through the same information. And I think it's fair to say that there's a fairly substantial concern with two what may be contradictory issues. One is the public safety associated with the road. That's a big concern of all parties. And number two is private property rights. That's a big concern of all the parties. But those two may be in conflict in this situation, which is another reason to try and have those discussions with the property owners. If we're willing or able to come to some negotiated settlement that makes everybody better off, that's the first choice. But if we're not, then your choices are limited going forward to either the status quo, which is really not a very good answer, or to the Major Street standards, or to one-way going west.
Is there any comments, questions?
Not at this time.
Then maybe it would be appropriate to request a closed session to review the city's attorney's opinion in more detail, and then there may be more discussion afterwards.
We need a motion to go into,
I'll make that motion.
Make every effort to have discussions with the adjacent property owner to try and negotiate some settlement that's mutually beneficial to all of the parties concerned, but that we have a public need to fix 12th Street, and that is the path that we intend to take. Whether or not we can come to some agreement with the property owners, but certainly our first choice is to have that discussion and come to something mutually beneficial. If that is the council's direction, that's the way we'll proceed. Thank you.
next we'll move on to concerns and comment, citizen comment. This is an opportunity for citizens to comment on municipal services, activities, or areas of city involvement. Citizens in attendance shall be recognized by the mayor for comments, which are limited to 5 minutes. Letters submitted to council will not be publicly read. Is there anyone who'd like to comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to officials and stuff. City clerk,
Nothing, Your Honor.
interim city manager,
Nothing?
city attorney,
Nothing, Your Honor.
DPW,
Nothing, Your Honor.
finance director,
Nothing, Your Honor.
city engineer,
Nothing, Your Honor.
Councilmember Cody,
Nothing, Your Honor.
Councilmember Sims,
Nothing, Your Honor.
Councilmember Goodwin,
Nothing, Your Honor.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
I have one question. The ready to serve for the sprinklers, have those charges been dropped from the billings?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Woodley,
Nothing, Your Honor.
Councilmember Conster.
Nothing, Your Honor. I'll make the motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll make it. I'll say it.
Meeting adjourned.